Here goes on the Oxford movement. This lecture may run a little long and I might have to stop it and break it up into a couple of parts, but I'll begin and see how far I get. If you'll pull a thread from my earlier lectures into our work this week, you'll recognize that at the beginning of the 19th century, the entire Anglican Communion, not just in America, but the entire Anglican Communion, had been in a state of unsettlement over the Catholic-Protestant issue for 3 full centuries. Things did not improve in the 1800s. In the years after the American Revolution, and in nervous reaction to the French Revolution, which overthrew the Church, government support for the Church of England was increased as a way of supporting religion per se. In 1818, the English Parliament voted funds for a large number of new urban churches, and they voted to finance Anglican establishments in British colonial possessions, for example, in Canada. That was a boon for Anglicanism, right? Well, not so fast. In 1828, the Tory government, a conservative government, abolished restrictions against Protestant dissenters, restrictions that wouldn't allow them to hold public office in England and in Wales. That was not well received by conservative Anglicans. Nor was the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829, which allowed Roman Catholics for the first time to attend university and to be elected as members of Parliament. See, Roman Catholics couldn't attend Oxford or Cambridge because they couldn't subscribe to the 39 Articles, because they would have to be members of the Church of England, and so they couldn't go to university. The Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829 allowed Roman Catholics to attend English universities, and it allowed them to be elected as members of Parliament. Protestant traditionalists of all stripes hated that. It got worse. In 1832, Parliament passed the Reform Bill, which altered and slightly expanded the social and democratic composition of the British electoral franchise, which allowed for more middle-class members, including Protestant dissenters, to be elected to the House of Commons. But then, in 1833, Parliament passed the Irish Church Temporalities Bill, which dissolved 10 redundant bishoprics in Ireland and redistributed their endowments. Money and land was involved. Oh my God. The bill was defended by the government as a piece of fiscally responsible, rational legislation. And in reality, it was. But it was passed at an extremely sensitive time politically, in the midst of continued recrimination over the relationship between church and state. And that bill, the Irish Church Temporalities Bill of 1833, sent 3 Oxford dons, John Keble, John Henry Newman, and Richard Hurrell Froude, into paroxysms of anger and launched the so-called Oxford movement in 1833. Keble, Newman, and Froude declared that Parliament had become Erastian in its behavior. Erastus being a figure who argued for the civil government as having complete control over all matters religious in the state. They were soon joined by Edward Bouvier Pusey, professor of Hebrew, who would become the stabilizing force in the loyally Anglican phase of the movement after 1845. So the 4 major figures to remember: Keble, Newman, Froude, and Pusey. A sermon preached by Keble on July 14, 1833, okay, so that's Bastille Day, at Oxford's University Church, St. Mary's, was entitled The National Apostasy. It threw down the gauntlet, arguing that the state had transgressed its prerogatives and could no longer be trusted to protect the church. Indeed, the state had betrayed the church. The church needed to recover its historic identity, its true authority. So the Oxford reformers decided on an aggressive strategy of rallying all loyal churchmen. Yes, they were men, mostly clergymen, especially those with high church sympathies. They did so with a series of outspoken yet quite scholarly treatises called Tracts for the Times. Between the years 1833 and 1841, 90 such pamphlets were published. I shudder a bit to call them pamphlets because by the end some of those pamphlets were the length of short books. I mean, Newman's Tract 90 was 120 pages. Those pamphlets fill 6 large volumes in the Iliff Library. I feel incredibly blessed to be at an institution that has a library that actually has the Tracts of the Times on the shelves. Unbelievable. In the very first tract, which appeared in September 1833, John Henry Newman put the matter squarely. Choose your side, since side you shortly must, with one or the other party, even though you do nothing. Even though you do nothing, the Oxford Tractarians said you were duty-bound to choose a side between their position about the church and its identity and its authority over and against the Parliament and the claims that it made to make decisions on behalf of the church. Well, I see that time is moving along quickly. I'm going to stop here and take this up then in a second part, part 2, continuing my comments on the Oxford movement.